Okay, so I think that Tzar Guards don't really belong in the roster for Kislev. And what I mean by that is they're the odd men out. They're the only people who don't have some sort of ranged options. And I want to fix that. Now, what I have in mind is I want to add guns to them. And that's going to add that visually, but mostly functionally. So I've already worked on a few, but let's go ahead and open. So I'm in Asset Editor. I'm going to open up my reskin. So I already have my first two bodies taken care of. I just want to show you the third. So what I did was replaced their axe with a pistol in that model, and on this one, replaced the knife that's here with a pistol. So I'm going to do the same thing for the last Tzar Guard. Now, note a few things. Some of the times it's spelled Tzar Guard, and some of them TZ. So no consistency. But you'll see that as well, like with Repants, you'll see her name spelled Response in some of the things. Just in case you're looking through, there are definitely typos. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up the Tzar Guards third body. So rigid 3. Okay. So what I want to do here is I want to get rid of this knife here and replace it with a gun. It's not that I have a problem with the knife. I like the knife. It's that I want to have a gun there and I want the gun to fit well. But this will bring up a few things that I haven't really covered in other videos all that much. So first of all, I'm going to go ahead and split this using the split mesh, and I'm going to select the knife. So it is that one. Okay. So I can delete it. And which one's that? Okay, there we go. So I want to make note of this part here because I want to make sure that I don't have it selected right now. So I held down Control after selecting all of these. I held down Control and clicked on it. And I'm going to merge this. The reason why I did that is it's going to make it so that when I animate the gun, it will stick to the correct thing. Otherwise, I've been having issues with the pin. I think the pin tool is a lot better, probably. It could probably do more than it used to be able to, but it's also more complex than it used to be. And it's more complex than it's needed. So I'm going to go ahead and add the gun, and that's going to be the armored, spelled British way, armored. H1C Kislev props, and it's the armored pistol. And I'm going to do the second one. I like it as a generic. Okay, so I've added that rigid model here. So first thing I'm going to do is right click and make it editable. Now with this, I want to change the pivot. The pivot is always something weird. And since I just want it to be exactly where I place it, I'm putting it 0, 0, 0. All right. Now what I want to do is I want to move it in such a way that it's going to fit up here. And I might scale it down a little bit, but we'll see. So I am going to turn it. Okay, I'm going to bring it out. All right, so I want to turn it some more. And I think I'm going to have it be flipped. So now I just did that. Let me mirror it. So sometimes when I want to mirror it, what we can do is take the Z here and just say like a -1 or X, it doesn't matter. But I want to mirror it this way. Okay, so that's a little bit more in the direction that I'm looking. So I want to kind of have it like this. But notice now, I don't want the flintlock portion of it to be in him. I want it to be on the outside. So I'm going to mirror it again, this time with X. So I'm going to say -1. Okay, so now that's a little bit better. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and move it. All right. And it's just a matter of kind of getting what looks good to you. So I want to get it far enough back that it's not really clipping through this. Okay, so something like that. That's a little bit out though. So instead, I am going to, maybe I'll bring it in and then just get rid of that flintlock portion, that portion right here. So that way I can get it kind of more in line with what I want. Now the other option is it's a little big right now, so I'm actually going to scale this down to 0.8, 0.8. So scale it down by about 20%, technically 19%, but all right, so that's a little bit better. And now we can kind of move it around a little bit more. Like I said, I think I'm going to remove that flintlock portion of it. Okay, just pretend it doesn't exist, right? So I'm going to press the I and I'm going to split this, knock that off. All right, deleted it. I'm going to recombine and review. All right, so now I have a gun. It looks decent. It looks like it's in an okay position. Actually, I'm going to move it over a little bit here. Okay, so that looks pretty good. So we have a gun. So now what I want to do is I want to make sure that it animates to it, because if you look here, it's currently not animating. So what I need to do is I'm going to select pin and I'm going to skin wrap. So I'm going to pin this thing. So I'm going to have it selected and add to meshes. And then I'm going to pin it to the thing right here, just this loop here. So add meshes to that. And I'm going to hit apply. Now, if you look, it moves with that. So that takes care of the animation, and I can now combine those into a single file now that I don't need to select it separately. Okay, so we have our gun animated on his waist here. So I think that's good. Again, I just want to have guns on them just to make more sense with it. Okay, so now I'm going to generate our level of detail. And I am going to save this thing. So that will save in my reskins, right clicking, save. Okay, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to start a new pack file, right click, add from pack file. So first off, I'm going to get these things in it. So that's actually in my Warhammer 3 reskins. So this is my HU1C models. So those are the 3 models there. Okay, now in order to get those things to show up in the game, I'm probably going to have to mess with the variant mesh a little bit. So that's all right. I'm going to add from pack file. I'm going to go to data. And in this case, I'm going to be looking for variants. Now, if I remember right, they're not in just normal variants. Maybe they're in variants too. Let's see. So if we take a look for the Tzar Guard, okay, let's see if it's spelled Tzar. All right, whatever. Let's just take a look at it. Okay, nope, it's not 2. Add from pack file. Again, it always sucks when they are outside of the normal variants. So let's see 3 and watch the aren't or something, and I'm just imagining things. Keys live, okay. So we have the armored kossars. I'm going to pull them because I want to make sure that I use the same guns as they have. Then I have my Tzar Guards right here and here. Okay, so I'm currently just pulling those as a reference point. So here, if we look at the Tzar Guard, we have the head and body. Now the body is described with a WS model, and these are rigid models. So I'm going to have to change these to rigid model V2. I'm going to do the same thing on the next line. It's a little, all right. I'm going to do the same thing on the next line. I'm going to replace my male body 2, and I'm going to do rigid model. And I'll do the same here with the third. Now, I could have just used one model if I wanted to be lazy, but basically, if you have multiple options underneath like a slot for body or head in this case, it randomizes it. So it has a 1 in 3 chance to pick from the first, second, or third. So the more you add, the more random you're going to have. One thing to note, if I remember right, Warhammer 2's max was like 5 or 4. I ran into that max before. So just be aware, I don't know what it is on this one, but it's probably the same. I don't see any reason why they would have changed it. Okay, now I'm going to do the same thing for the Tzar Guard here. So the two-handed models. So we have rigid model, and rigid model. Okay, now the armored kossars have in weapon slot 3, they have their pistols. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy this. Now notice something, when you don't have something in a prop, it has this little forward slash, and when you do, it has nothing there. So when I go into here, currently in prop 3 have nothing, they have that backslash. I'm going to have to get rid of it. That's something that it took me a while to learn. I didn't realize why sometimes it would work and sometimes it wouldn't. So what I would do is just copy directly from one that was basically set up the same way, rather than do it myself. But then I noticed this. Okay, so we now have them wielding one of the pistols. I don't need this anymore for the armored kossars. They don't need to be there in my folder anymore. Okay, so the variant mesh is now defining using the correct models. So now what I need to do is I need to actually get the gun into the game. So visually they have them, but now we have to change a few other things. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add from pack file. I'm going to go to data now. All right, so we need a few things. Land units tables. This will enable me to kind of add the gun ammunition and also add the gun while also changing the animation, because the animation for these guys don't have a gun involved, and so it won't animate correctly. So I'm going to have to pull the animations from the armored kossars. So let me go to Keyslive, and I'm going to be looking for the armored kossars here, 0 and 1. Now, one thing to notice, these are named main, and then you also have like prologues, PRO. So they have things from the prologue, so they're a little different, which is weird. Um, I haven't actually fully played the prologue. Okay, so I have those guys. Now I'm going to find the Tzar Guard. Notice how they're spelled here, TZAR. Anyway, so we have those guys. I'm going to Control C. I'm going to delete everything that isn't them. So I Control A and then deleted it. Now I'm going to right click, add row, and Control V. So I just have these guys, my armored kossars and my Tzar Guard. 0 is the sword and shield, and this is the two-handed hammer. 0 is the sword and shield and two-handed swords. Okay, now if we look, the first thing we need to do is deal with their animation. I'm going to take the same animations from their armored kossar variants into my Tzar Guard. I usually don't like to change animations if I can avoid it, but in this case, there's no getting around it. Just because if I do this, if I make an edit to land units, anybody who uses a mod that changes stats, it's not going to be compatible. And a lot of people do that for some reason. I personally, it doesn't bother me because I don't do that. I don't like to change the balance of units really. I say as I'm changing a unit. Anyway, so now what I'm going to do is primary missile weapon. So they use a pistol, and I am not going to use that pistol. I'm going to actually make my own. It's basically going to be the same. So I'm going to take the accuracy though and paste that here. And the primary ammo, I'm going to do the same. So essentially what I want to do is I don't want to mess with the tables that set the bonuses. So there are things that, like, if you take a hero skill that improves armored kossars, like ranged unit stuff, it's not going to affect the Tzar Guard one. Basically, I don't want to add anything that will affect the Tzar Guard's guns, just because I don't want to mess with that much. Essentially, I just really want them to have a gun. So instead, I want to give them a decent pistol. So a pistol that's better than the armored kossars, but like it doesn't improve. So there's benefits to the armored kossars as well. So what I need to do is I need to generate this. So when I don't know where something lies, I can gloss over the or mouse over the primary missile weapon tab here, and it says this column is a reference to missile underscore weapons key. So that tells me where I can find that. So if I go into my data pack, missile weapons tables, we can go here, and I'm going to look for the armored kossar pistol. Now, originally, I was thinking of giving them like a shotgun pistol that only had a couple shots, but I have decided against that. I want them to still have the ability to shoot for a somewhat prolonged time, but not significant. All right, so we have this thing as a reference. I'm going to add row, and I'm going to give it a new name. So I'm just going to call it like Tzar gun. Okay. So now that I have that, I have to do a default projectile. I can pull, the projectile is what actually gives the stats. So I have to figure out where that is. Again, it's in the projectiles. So I'm going to, still in database, projectiles. We have projectiles tables. Okay. So now going to armored kossar pistol bullet, Control C, delete everybody else, add row, Control V. I'm going to add a row below it, and this one I'm going to name it something. I use the same key. These aren't the same keys. They're not describing the same thing. This is the key, but just to keep things easy, I just name them all the same thing. So in this case, I'm going to name it Tzar Guards gun. Okay. So what I want to do is I'm just going to copy all of these things over. Well, I'm going to have to rename this, but our gun. Okay, now a few things about this. Projectile number. If I change this, it turns into a shotgun. So if I made this like 10, it would shoot 10 projectiles at a time that do the stats that we describe each of them. So I'm not going to do that. What I'm going to do is I'm going to switch this damage. So basically, I'm going to change this to 7 and this to 18. So now it's more armor piercing damage. Since they're a tier 3 unit, I feel like that seems appropriate. I'm not changing their overall damage output or anything else, but I'm just giving them a gun that's better at piercing. This is what it looks like. There's some basic things to that. Oh, one thing to note with spread here, if you change the spread, try and just match other things. Like if you have a shotgun, you want to work with the spread. But there's a lot of things that you can mess with on these projectiles. Shots per volley is where like it usually shoots 1 in animations, but it will do like a machine gun sort of thing. Anyway, okay. So we have that taken care of. We have base reload time as well. Since they have, I think I'll just leave it there for the time being. 11 seconds is what that means. Okay, so now I don't need this as a reference anymore. I'm deleting it. I'm going to do the same thing over here. I just am going to take, default projectile. This is the key here. It's Tzar gun as well. Tzar gun. Otherwise, I'm going to do this. Now, what is precursor? Precursor is when you have like the chameleon stalkers, i.e. my favorite units in the game. Well, in the second game, chameleon stalkers, they only really shoot when you like run at somebody and you're charging them, they'll then shoot. That's what that is. So I'm having it where they will sit there and shoot as well, so I don't do precursor. Okay, so I'm going to delete my reference one. Okay, now I'm going to right click, rename, and I'm going to name it Tzar gun data. All right, do the same thing here. We need to rename these, otherwise it will overwrite the other data file. And so if we're just making changes to it, just little changes and not pulling everything, then we want to have that. Okay, and I change it once I've made changes, like once I'm done with it, essentially. So I have the animation changed over for the Tzar Guards. I now have my primary missile weapon. I'm going to give them Tzar Gun. And same thing here, Tzar Gun. So we're good there. Primary missile weapon, we are okay. Just making sure there's nothing else I want to change. AI usage guide. I'm going to make them a melee hybrid so the computer uses them appropriately. Okay, I think that's good enough. Now I'm going to delete those guys because again, I'm only making changes here. So Tzar Gun. Okay, so I have them with a gun. I have them looking like they have the gun. I have the projectiles all set up appropriately for them. And yeah, I think that's all I need to do for these guys. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and save my pack file as like masked mustachios, um, Czar gun. I'm gonna have to double check before I upload this of like how it's spelled, if it's TZ. I think it's TZ in the game, so I'll probably do that. And maybe I should change all the spelling of these things. Not that it matters. Who cares? Be inconsistent like CA was. So mass mustachios are gun. I'm going to save. The other thing I need to do now is make a 256 by 256 PNG, name the exact same thing, saved into the same data file, and then I can upload it to the workshop. I'm just choosing not to record that for every mod going forward. If you need, just watch the end of every other mod video I've made prior to this. So that takes care of giving guns to the Tzar Guards. So hopefully that helps you when you're going into modding. I really like messing with the projectile tables. There's one of my favorite mods I've made was changing the Empire cannon to be grape shot. Loved that. So I'm going to do that as soon as they bring that out. Anyway, thanks for watching.